All right. I tell you what, I apologize. I'm a couple minutes late here today, and that is because I like literally just jumped off. I had another meeting with another mitigator, and we were coming up with a strategy. And sometimes we have too much fun coming up with radon mitigation marketing strategies, and I'm like, we've got to jump off so we can jump into this call. So hope everybody's doing good. Happy Friday. It's like everybody's loading in. Let me see if I can get it to show up on Facebook again this week. I was happy it did last week. So, how's everybody doing? That
Oh,
good?
good. It's Friday.
It is. It is. We'll see. Let's see. I haven't seen Dave jump in here yet. Let's see. He's probably boxing up one of your orders, would be my guess. Let's see if he's coming. All right. Oh, anybody? Oh, anybody have anything new, exciting that's happening going on?
No, it's actually been slow.
Been slow?
Yeah, snow melted. Everybody's out playing.
Yeah, I that was one of the things that I was talking about with the guy I was just talking with about how, people head outside and then all of a sudden forget that, they've got radon in their house and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll just deal with it in October when I go back inside." Like, you know, the cicadas come out and people forget about radon. Like that's the natural progression of
Just cicadas.
those of you in Illinois, they've got like the Venn diagram of all the cicadas, and we like our area here in Central Illinois. There's two different groups that are coming out this year. Like, good luck with a billion of them. Like, yay! It's great. Yeah, looks like David's jumping in. Who's got some? Anybody got any big things happening this week? Cool things that are going on?
My week was filled with moldy houses, so I didn't do
Oh,
anything great on this week.
oh, mold. That is those of you who how many of you guys also do mold?
That's my primary. I'm,
That's
I'm
your
that's primarily it
main.
was about 75% of what I do.
I we had I've told you guys my wife is a realtor and we've had a couple homes that she's gone in and you know you walk in and you go, is that the vacant house smell or is that the mold smell? All right, we can test for that. And but again, like, you know, as a layperson, like, mold has a smell, right? I mean, not always, but I mean, it does. There's a smell that you recognize, but then
Right.
when we're all trying to sell radon and trying to convince someone that it has no smell, it has no taste, it has no color, it's not staining the sheets. It's like it's so easily ignored, for so long. It is it's hard. And so especially those of you that are doing work that's not in real estate, right? And so if you're trying to just get those concerned homeowners, that is it's a different thing. So
Yeah, we call it on the mold side, we call it the odor associated with wet or moldy building or space or
yeah,
whatever. There's no true definition for an odor for mold.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can get all kinds of odors. But I had a lady call me a couple weeks ago that wasn't feeling well in her house, and her homeowners association had told her that she needs to get her house tested for radon. If she doesn't feel good, she might have radon. I was
yeah,
like, well, "Do you have lung cancer?"
yeah. You
you
would
know,
know because you'd be in the hospital.
yeah.
But yeah, I did have I mean, I I talked to a realtor. Um my old office, I shared a wall with an office, another office there, and there's somebody who was also a realtor that worked in that office. And, we walked in and she, she's like, yeah, I've got, because I was testing for radon in there because I'm like, I want to know if, if it's got radon. And she's like, yeah, I've just got really bad headaches. It's probably, high radon. And I'm like, no, like I still want you to be concerned about radon because you
Yeah.
should know, but like part of me wonders if we, if people, thought that the headaches were caused by radon, maybe we would get, more business. But so,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard one sometimes.
yep. So, well, I tell you what, we've got a good group here. David is here, but we don't have a camera on him yet. So, David, if you hit your start your video, and then we'll have you jump in. And let's see who else. Oh, there's David coming along. And I am still trying to. Nope, we're sharing screens. That's not what we want.
The
Let me turn off the. Okay, I'm going to share a whiteboard because that will take over whoever was sharing their screen. And then I'm going to stop that. We'll go back to this. Perfect. I know there's a setting in here that tells me that not allow other people to do it. Who can share? Host only. There we go. I don't think we have any screen sharing in this time around. So yeah, we're waiting on David to flip on his camera there, and I think, oh, there you are. And David, don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, I was trying to
There you are.
I'm unmuted now. Okay. Took 3 tries.
That's okay. This is what Fridays at 3 do to us. You've already checked out for the weekend.
Yeah, well, my limited knowledge doesn't help either. Ben's got a good point about you can't see, hear, or smell it. So I always said if just one of those 3 were part of our business, we'd all be extremely busy. But what other industry do you know that you can't see, hear, or smell? If you're a plumber, you're going to do one of the 3. And if you're an electrician, any other trade you can think of, you got one of those senses that's going to determine whether you're busy or not. So we have to rely on education because that's all we got. So Ben makes a good point about that. So it is another challenge about being a radon person. I was going to talk a minute, right, Ben, about the comment I made about crawl spaces being
Yeah.
heated.
Well, I was gonna here. Let me read that for you. So, again, hey, we're excited because last week or actually, I think today we had 150 people in our Facebook group. So if you're not part of that, definitely join us up over there. We're glad to have everybody in there. And I am actively trying to replicate what I did last week, but I don't remember what I did to get it to go live in the Facebook group. So all this conversation is not happening on Facebook yet. But while David gets going, I'll try to get it over there. One of the things that Patrick Hartshorn is Patrick in here today? I'm not sure if he's in here. Oh yeah, Pat. Yeah, you're there. Gosh, Pat, I'm totally. So one of the things Patrick said on the Facebook side of things was great information about our crawl space conversation. He said, I disagree with a comment towards the end about cutting in a supply and return vent in the crawl space ducting oh, wow, that was weird. My computer just went crazy. For the heating system, technically that is duct leakage, and in some areas is a code violation by allowing communication from the unconditioned space to the conditioned living space. I've worked in cold climate indoor environments for 20 years, and we don't allow it for multiple reasons. Crawl space with ducts alone, no furnace in the crawl space, stay plenty warm, even at the coldest of temperatures, just from the hot ducting releasing heat. Also, the majority of homes that fail a mold test in the living space where there are crawl space mold issues, have a source of communication between the two spaces, such as makeup air or supplies and returns off the duct. Food for thought. David and I were talking about that, and Patrick, that's a great comment. So David and I were talking about that this week when we were talking about how we wanted. So Pat or Dave, I'll let you repeat what you were telling me because I think it was a good comment there.
Well, yeah, once again, anytime we can stand corrected, because I think maybe I outspoke myself, because experts in that industry have a different take on it, and different codes in different areas. And I think that I spoke from a standpoint of what I'm used to, and I'm not used to so much mold in crawl spaces or other environmental concerns. But really didn't consider that many crawl spaces and many climates and topographies may have other harmful elements in crawl spaces. And I think I was speaking from the fact that we've always been educated to the fact that all areas need to have air exchanges. And so typically when we do a crawl space in our area, it ends up being a very dry, clean environment. If you do a crawl space barrier to the degree, and you don't have the other elements that may be harmful after you do that barrier film. So I think my comment was made, and we've done this several times. My comment was made in order to get what is now a very clean environment, a very healthy environment, in order to get air exchanges, was what my comment was based on. But I stand corrected. I think that that's not the only comment that we've had, but I appreciate anytime somebody does that, because I certainly don't want anyone here to think that I'm an expert at heating and air conditioning or the codes that go with it. I barely know how to do radon, so I appreciate any comment about anything that way.
And I'm speaking from a cold climate aspect too. So our crawl spaces up here are what are called semi-conditioned. We don't insulate floors, we insulate foundations. And we put in a bathroom fan on a humidistat in the crawl spaces, and then they're vented that way through negative pressure. You can't do makeup air, because makeup air has a headlight effect. It comes in right here, it goes out a little bit and goes right out the fan. And everything outside that headlight doesn't get vented. So we use negative pressure. But we can't have communication between the crawl space and the house, because one is a living environment and one is not an occupiable space. So they don't allow it.
Got it.
Oh.
In my particular area, every home used to have just venting, and these vents had these little slide by apparatuses that never worked after about the first 2 years, where the consumer was supposed to close them in the winter and open them in the summer. Well, it's funny, because every time, as a radon person, and you guys are all laughing, I can see it, but every time I went in one, especially in the winter, I'd say, holy cow, this crawl space is cold. No wonder.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no consumer that ever shut them if they were operational, as I just said. But the way I understand it now, they are totally not legal in my part of the country. And so I guess I still have the question, at least in my part of the country, if there is no if there's no chance of air exchanges, is that good or bad? But you're saying in your part of the country, you have an exhaust fan. Well, you can't have an exhaust fan without the air coming from somewhere. So in other words, you're creating makeup air with an exhaust fan. And to your knowledge, then that exhaust fan doesn't create a negative imprint on your energy bill.
No, there's tons of studies on that. The Cold Climate Housing Research Center in Alaska and the Climate Housing of Canada both have done tons of studies on this. The energy consumption is very, very minimal. It far outweighs damage from moisture in a crawl space.
Excellent.
So, points keep that crawl space dry. Now, we're still putting these fans in when a radon system is also installed. The radon system trumps the pressure that the fan can create. So it doesn't affect a radon system at all.
Sure.
And then, in theory, if that radon system is doing its job properly and you have a sealed vapor barrier, that crawl space ventilation fan probably ain't going to ever kick on very much.
Well, yeah, that would be a point I would think. Oh, yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So,
The moisture is being kept out by the radon system, not allowing it to leak, through a hole or something in the vapor barrier.
sure.
So,
It's interesting because no matter what subject we talk about, I'm always saying, hey, everybody's topography warrants different techniques for almost everything we do. And so I think sometimes the radon industry is very guilty of teaching generalities without considering topography. I think that's a mistake we make in our industry, but it's all interesting. So we decided today to spend a little bit of time on talking about sumps and sump basins. And that's another thing about topography. I laughed last week because one of my good friends out west, he's never seen a sump pump, and he does hundreds and hundreds of radon systems. And so it could be true in Alaska, it could be true
yeah.
in Georgia, for all I know. Well, I actually do know it's not true in Georgia, but there are certain places that don't have sump basins. But I can tell you, central United States is loaded with them. And there's an advantage typically to a sump basin because it's somehow or another it's usually associated with tile or with something having to do with communication. Not always true, but we call it a racetrack. Oftentimes the modern homes in the central United States are going to have an interior footing tile that surrounds the entire basement slab. And so it makes a great communication channel. And in most places, not Illinois, but in most places, you can even use the sealed sump lid as your suction area. So your suction point can be in the sump lid. And the only reason that some states, including Illinois, does not allow that, it can be an effective way to lower radon, but it's also been once again, studies, what Illinois found was that too often an emergency sump replacement, which is, have you ever noticed how sump replacements are almost never just a general happening? They're always an emergency. None of us seem to say, well, now my sump's 6 years old, and every 6 years I've got it on the calendar to change it, whether it's working good or not. It's always ends up being an emergency. So in a sump emergency, typically nothing gets put back on because it also never happens during the daytime. And so you've got somebody, the consumer, the next door neighbor, or a plumber over that sump basin trying to get the water out of the basement or trying to prevent the water from coming in the basement. They're certainly not going to seal that lid back down and return the radon pipe to its position. And when you do your takeoff point in a sump lid, you've added a 3-inch pipe with a 3 5/8 hole in the top of a sump lid that oftentimes you got to find room for, number one, but then you're required to have some way to take it apart, which is typically a rubber coupling, say a foot up above the sump lid. And so it has to be easily removable for emergency sump replacement, but it also makes it very easy not to put back in. And so in my state, they found too many instances of an open radon fan to the basement, because if that rubber coupling was not put back on and installed in the sump lid, then you've got an open 3-inch pipe to a basement feeding a radon fan that's capable of 250 cubic foot of air a minute. And imagine what that does to a basement environment, including, as I've said before, especially in the older style homes, carbon monoxide poisoning. If you've got a hot water heater and or furnace that's vented through the 80% method, and you add a 250 cubic foot a minute open pipe to that basement, I wouldn't want to be liable for that. So I kind of support the fact that you guys need to reconsider using the sump lids. We all know it's effective, but reconsider the possible downside of doing that, because it's really not too much trouble with today's tools. I mean, we've got a cordless Milwaukee core drill that can core drill a 5-inch hole in 5 minutes. And so it's amazing what tools we have nowadays. What is truly the matter with core drilling a hole 12 inches from the sump? And as long as we're talking about doing that, we build a lot of systems with our core drilled hole 12 inches from the sump, and leaves that sump lid a lot cleaner for the next person with that emergency. And I also had a comment just today from a guy that said he's sort of a new guy, but he was actually going to use a camera so he could locate the tile, so he could core drill right on top of that tile. With his his mentality was that would give him the best communication possible. And I argued this last week about crawl spaces. If you're right on top of that tile, it's not as good a communication as it is if you're beside that tile, because you get the void area beside that tile that typically happens, whether it be a crawl space barrier or a concrete floor, but you also are limiting yourself if you're right on top of that tile. Now, no question about it, you can cut the top of that tile out and increase that communication, but you're still going down a 4-inch typically, or a 3-inch tile with very small slots in it. And so I think that your communication can happen a lot better beside that tile than it is on top of it. But that was just something that popped up today. So I made a little list right before we got here about some of the points about crawl spaces, just haven't done them so many years, but some of you guys have done them for more years than me. So feel free to chime in, but they're a big liability. And the only time I ever had to fork out a bunch of money for a basement is when I personally forgot to tighten a rubber coupling on the discharge side of a sump. And the next time it ran, it blew the pipe apart and flooded a basement, and I was responsible. So I do a couple of things to try to lessen the liability. My other concern about a sump basin is us people that are used to working with the sumps also know that a radon system is dependent upon that sealed sump lid. Without that sump lid being sealed, we have an ineffective radon system, or a lot less effective radon system, including energy loss through the air. So we actually have a label. We don't have it through our supply system, but through our mitigation company, we had a label made that we put into a baggie with a hole in it and tied it on every discharge pipe. And it was reasonably simple in what it said, that this is part of a radon system. Please call David Smith Radon Remedies at such and such number for any with any questions about resealing this after use. I can't remember the exact language, and I sold the mitigation company 2 years ago, so I don't have the label. But anyway, anything you can do. Another thing we did, I'm always concerned about a plumber or homeowner never sealing that lid back, and that labeling encouraged plumbers and homeowners to call us back. And typically a plumber would call us back and we just say, hey man, here's how to put it back together. We made it as friendly as we can for the homeowner or the plumber. Just simply reinstall what you took apart, and then everybody would be eternally grateful. But we would get a chance to explain the importance of it a little bit. But don't you guys worry a little bit about the next emergency sump replacement totally making a dangerous situation. First of all, I'd rest assured the radon went back up. So if we all believe in the cancer-causing effects of radon, then you've also added that element back in. But above and beyond that, as I was talking about, energy loss and possibly even carbon monoxide. So I think that sometimes we need to reconsider all the effects that a sump lid have on a radon system. Another thing, in order to protect ourselves, is we have a sign-off sheet. So one person will fix that sump and do the work of sealing that lid, replacing the lid and sealing it, whatever it takes to seal the sump effectively. And when he gets done, he's gonna check the operation of that sump. And a second person has to come around. The first person signs a sheet on every item. Did you check this firm code? Did you check the operation? They have to sign it. The second person has to check it and initial it. So if there's ever a consumer that calls up and says, hey, my sump don't work, those guys forgot to plug it in. We've probably all been there. Or it's just not working since you guys left. Then I can grab that sheet and say, hey, guys, here's the guy that did it. Here's the guy that okayed it. What's up? But you know, with the guys being honest, it did eliminate the need, the fear of it. So I think that's a couple suggestions that I would make, because I believe that we are not taking, as a industry, we're not taking sump basin serious enough. So labeling and helping your liabilities by having a sign-off sheet. We all know they're time consuming. I made a comment many times that sometimes the guys will go to a job and look at the sump basin and just be totally depressed and say, you know, this thing's gonna take me forever. And I've seen times that sump basins are complicated enough with today's backup systems and homeowner remedies, so to speak, that sometimes a sump basin takes as long to do as a radon system. But that's just the way it is. It's just a part of what we do. And so I think that the time consuming part of it has to be accepted. I always told the guys, look, I don't care how long it takes you to do a sump basin if you do it right, but I do care if you do it wrong. And I think it's a rule we all ought to live by. I talked a little bit about how nice it is when we walk into a home that has a sump basin and you open the lid and see a tile coming into it. You're happy as you can be, because we call that a no-brainer home. We've just gotten our racetrack, our communication track, and we can be rest assured that typically it's a good communication line under the entire basement. So we know that having a sump basin is a positive if there's a tile coming to it, for sure. So I talked a little bit about how I believe that Illinois is right in not allowing the sump lid to be your point of communication. We do allow it for a secondary in a tough home, in a home where we're having trouble with communication or trouble getting the radon numbers low enough. It is allowed for as a secondary. It's also allowed in today's homes. I don't know, guys in Alaska, are they doing this a lot? But we're finding more and more homes that have in-floor heat. And so, you know, we've got tools that we can locate the thermal tools, we can locate that heat. But I've hit one of them before, and the person that installed it was the one that made the X. And so that made me feel better, but I did take the time to help him expose it so he could repair it. But in a situation where there's in-floor heat, we've also got challenges too. And Illinois recognized that enough that they allow you to use the sump lid as a suction point in that situation. So, you know, a little bit about sump lids, period. And I was in a pretty intense meeting a week or two ago about the new rules that Illinois is writing a new rule book. They haven't had a new rule book in several years, so we have sort of been having meetings. And in that meeting, sumps were talked about, sump basins and sump sealing, and how to access them during emergencies. And some of a couple of the really busy reputable radon mitigators say they quit using anything to seal a sump lid down except silicone. And I'm like, I had a little bit of an issue with that, because I'm used to seeing some pretty uneven concrete around a sump basin for multiple reasons, but a lot of times the plumber will try to set it lower than the floor so that then the concrete person has to taper the concrete. A lot of times it's just in an area where it can't be accessed good, so the concrete guy gets sloppy about it or has problems accessing it. Either way, how many times do we do a sump that has some pretty unusual concrete around it? And I raised that question in this meeting, and the comment was they use as much caulk as they have to, but their logic to the situation was they don't want anything to prevent the homeowner or the neighbor or the plumber to slow them down to taking that lid off. And many years ago, we used to use a few tap cons to hold it down. And we learned with a couple of plumbers calling us and screaming at us that tap cons are a horrible idea. They go in good, but they don't come out. So what we did for many years and still do is all we do is we put 4 little blue plastic anchors, you know, the kind that are 50 cents for 10,000. 4 little blue plastic anchors and 4 stainless steel screws, 1.25 inches, whatever long, 1 inch long. And that's all we do to hold a sump lid in place. And we figure that's just a Phillips head screw and then a little bead of silicone where the sump lid meets the floor. And so I think that's a good process, and it requires very little caulk, and it requires only a Phillips screwdriver to remove 4 screws very easily. So there's different ways, and everybody may have their own idea. We think our idea was the best, but I think everyone has their own ideas. Also, we are big believers in viewports, and any of you that are my customers, I think a lot of you are, you'll hear me preach about how viewports built my business over and over and over again. I never went to a bid without a viewport under my arm, because typically I could say this removable viewport is more than likely exclusive to my company. And even if it was in the early days when we did some real estate work, even if it was a seller, I always tell the customers, even if it was a seller, that seller would probably look at you and say, look, I don't care. I'm looking for the cheapest bid. But then that seller was almost always a buyer. And we all need to remember that. Sellers are buyers too. But when he went to buy his next home, he'd be saying, what the heck was the name of that guy that had that neat thing under his arm that I could pull out of that sump so I could tell if my sump pump was working? What the heck was his name? Because he's the one I want to do my house. And so it was a sales tool beyond belief. I can tell you $16, $18 viewport just got me literally thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and multitudes of jobs over the years. And so I'm a big believer in viewports. The national code now requires a access port, is what it's called, an access port in every sump basin. So now most of you know enough about ARST and ANSI ARST and the codes that they have been changing some things, but one of the things they change is now we are all required to have an access port in a sump lid. Well, I went further when in my argument with Illinois, at least, I said, why should we charge a consumer for an access port if it's going to require a bunch of tools or caulk or both to remove? Because first of all, the consumers we are serving nowadays, many of them don't even own a screwdriver. You guys got to remember that we're serving a different generation. Most of them have a screwdriver, but it's a very small one to take their computer apart. So we need to remember that, in my opinion, an access port that required a screwdriver and a caulk gun was worthless and not a good buy for a consumer. Why charge a consumer for something they're not going to use? So that was my argument with Illinois. I mean, in my own situation, the last time I needed a caulk gun, I looked all over the place till I found it in a horse barn of all places, and who in the hell would have thought it was there? So if I couldn't find mine, I'm going to say that a lot of people don't even own one. And so I really pushed for not a toolless, caulkless viewport. And and I believe Illinois is going to adopt that. They'll be the third state in my knowledge. So some states are even requiring what I push for, which is if you're going to make a way for a person to check their sump, check the function of their sump before or after a big rain or anytime they're concerned, let's make it easy. Let's make it truly accessible. And so I'll show you a couple of what we got, but we're presently working on some less expensive models so that we can really encourage people to use them. And we've got a label made for them so it actually explains to the consumer, neighbor, or plumber, hey, this is how I can check and see what's going on. So I'll show you a little bit of what we got going. This is a standard one that it's been around forever. I use this on every home I ever did for 24 and a half years, hundreds and hundreds of homes, every home. It was a company policy. Wouldn't do a home if they didn't want that done. And all you do is simply put the gasket in a sump lid, such as this. And so the gasket went into the sump lid. I'm doing this backwards relatively easily. Then all that happens from there is this slides in it. So if I'm a consumer, I'm about to get a 5-inch rain. The weather guy says, hey, get ready for a 5-inch rain. I'm going to go and I'm going to take the flashlight from my phone and I'm going to shine it down there. And I'm already going to have the pre-knowledge that if my water is 3 inches high, everything's fine because I know my float's not going to kick on till 4 inches. So I'm going to shine my flashlight down there, identify that my sump is working fine, stick it back in. Now, did that take 2 seconds? No, it took a half a second. Then I'm going to go to work and I'm going to come home and that rain's all going to be over and my sump is going to work itself to death all day. I'm going to go down. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to shine my flashlight down there. I'm going to make sure my sump pump did its job. Instead of waiting till it starts flooding my basement, I got this to check. Now, having said that, I'm not going to tell you what the price of this is because I think I know, but I'm not going to say for sure. But we also thought with now that there's at least 3 states requiring it to be toolless and caulkless, let's see what else we can do for the guys that feel like they have to be more competitive. The truth of it is this lens is really nice. This is a really neat looking deal, but you can't tell much from looking through the lens anyway. So we found that we could make it for less money if we didn't put the lens in it, didn't go through the labor of the lens. But we also said, let's put a label on it. So here's the label. It says removable for inspection, reinstall after use. And I'm like, that way the consumer knows, because the problem with radon also is many times you never meet the end user of the home. Another argument I make with some of the things that this industry decides is how many radon systems do you do that you don't even meet the person that's going to live there? So how can you show them anything about the system? You can't show them a manometer and how it works. You couldn't show them a access port. You can't show them anything. So we decided that it was time to identify so that the consumer would have a better idea. And along with it, we still got a label with our phone number tied to the discharge pipe. So call us. Okay, we'll walk you through. See that little elevated white thing that says has a label on it? Rock it back and forth twice and it'll come out. Take a look down in there with the light from your phone and tell me what the water level is, because that water level is going to tell you that your sump's working fine. Now put it back in. So the next time it's going to rain, I do it. I have a viewport in my sump. I wouldn't be without one. You think I don't check it when they call for a 5-inch rain? I check it all the time because it's too easy not to. And so we're kind of proud. The national code now requires a minimum of a 4-inch hole. So this gasket takes a 4-inch hole, even though it's a 3-inch, it's a 3-inch viewport, so to speak. The hole for the gasket's 4-inch. So this meets the minimum standard. So as I said, this is getting ready for production, but we're going to make this in what we call 3-inch and 4-inch. And we're still going to make the old standby like mine. So we're trying to push this access port. Yeah, we got to do things for the consumer, and this is a consumer advantage here. I can tell you the plumbers, when they see it, they're like, "Holy cow! Thanks for putting that in." And the bigger one, I've had plumbers call me and say, "You're not going to believe this, but I was able to stick my pipe wrench down in there and use the backside of my pipe wrench and tap on the top of that sump and knock the points loose. That sump started working again, pumped all the water. I let it pump for a half hour till it cleaned up all the water in the footing tile, all the water around the house. And then I was able to make it a non-emergency to change the sump." So
David, that's
yeah,
that's one of the things. Just when I was as a tester, I'm trying to tee up, you as a mitigation company. And I'm as a tester, I am there a lot of times with the homeowner, and I would say, they're going to seal up the sump, they're going to put a viewport in there, they're going to put a window, and I'm like, as a sales pitch, when you have the opportunity with the homeowner, those of you that are going out to do quotes, to say, hey, the number one thing that's going to fail with your sump pump is going to be that switch. And when you have a ton of water and it's not, you can reach your arm into this hole, toggle that switch, and save yourself from a flooded basement. That is your sales pitch right there. It's a huge, huge, huge thing to let the homeowner know. And this $10 part is the difference between, I just talked with a mitigator today that, is getting $1,800 per job, where his competitors are getting $1,400. And it's that kind of thing that makes the difference, that people are like, oh yeah, you're not just worried about my radon, you're worried about a potential flooded basement. And to show that concern really helps in the sales pitch as well.
well, and Ben, talk about getting calls after a session. You're going to get electrician calls this week, because you can't stick your hand down in that water just to be safe. But I do tell people, you can use a board, you can use a piece of plastic pipe, but but I stick my
I was going to
hand.
say, if my basement's flooding, I'm my hands going in.
Yeah,
I'm hoping
yeah,
my
for sure.
GFI does its job.
Yeah. Well, and then another thing is sump lids. As I said, this is not as much of a sales pitch as it is. We're trying to make this for communication with people, but we sell our standard sump lids come in 5 different sizes. We pre-drill the holes for the viewports for a few people that want them. We do a lot of things. They come in clear, they come in black, but a sump lid becomes such an important part of a project that a lot of people have different ideas on how they do them. And I respect anybody that does a sump lid. It doesn't have to be my way, as long as they're trying to do the right thing for the consumer. I've seen times when people tried to put things that I refer to as saran wrap over a sump basin to try to seal it. And I'm like, no, that's cheating. But all you guys wouldn't be watching this if you weren't interested in the quality of work. I'm convinced of that. So anytime that any of this stuff will help you, I'd like to have some input on how what you guys think of these. As I said, there's 3 states that are right now either already requiring or on the verge of requiring that access port to truly be usable and not be requiring a screwdriver and a caulk gun. And I support that. I say either make it consumer usable or don't make it at all. But the national code does now require an access port with a minimum 4-inch hole. And this is our idea of making that possible as cost effective as we can. So if you guys have any input about this, let me know, because we're about to go into production for this product, and we think it's a good idea. But as I said, we've done, I don't know, thousands of radon systems, and it's been our company policy since the very first day we did a radon system. Our very first system, I well remember, had a viewport. And so it's always been a feeling of mine. And I've seen the advantage both in picking up jobs and in saving people's basements and in making jobs easier for plumbers, in consumers' confidence. I once had a builder that actually gave us somewhere between 75 and 85 homes a year. I was trying to push him to let us do his radon systems during construction. And of course, he got in my face and screamed at me for about an hour, as I figured he would. But then he said, you know, every time you activate a radon system for me, you put this little thing in the sump lid that people can take out to see if their sump's working. Would you do that if you were doing this for me? I said, oh, absolutely. It's a company policy with us. And he said, well, then you got all 85 homes. And that was 85 homes a year. But he said that when he does a final walkthrough with a consumer in a new home, he says the number one complaint is of the entire home. It's not, hey, that drywall doesn't look right, or I don't think that stair banister's right, or what about that light fixture? That isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. The number one complaint is, how the heck do I know if my sump's working? I can't see it. So he said, you have eliminated, by putting that viewport in, you've eliminated the number one complaint. And so, and I didn't mean to get too hung up on viewports. I'm limited on time today, I have an appointment, and Ben will take over. But also,
I have a question for you, David.
Yes.
You asked for input. I don't have input so much as a question. So it seems that you're talking about in where you're at, that these sump pumps are in cement. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. It's simply a hole that's made in the
right.
Yes.
Right. Well, my question is when I find them here, they're in crawl spaces, so there's just dirt, and I think I've seen one sump pump lid in the last couple years. I mean, they just normally are just an open well that they put a vapor barrier over top of it. So when we're doing a crawl space, we have the viewports. We've never really used them because there's no lids and no seaming requirement. And Pat could probably give me a better idea on if they're required and just not done. But so that was my only question, is that I rarely get a slab on grade that's, I can't remember when the last time I saw a slab on grade with a sump well in it.
Yeah, once again, topography. But boy, Ron, I appreciate you asking that question, because I think every one of us, most of us get into crawl space situations where there's a sump well in that crawl space. Sometimes we see a 5-gallon bucket with a pump in it, but either way, that pump needs to be accessible. And so what we typically do in a crawl space situation, you have nothing to screw a lid down to, of course. And so what we call it a donut ring, but if you think about it, if you take a oversized sump lid and you cut it so that it's just a 4-inch ring around the outside. So in other words, if you took something like this and you cut the whole center out so that the inner diameter was the size of the sump basin you're working with, you've got a nice piece of plastic left here. And then you lay it down before you do the radon barrier film. Then you go ahead and do your radon barrier film, and you make sure it's kind of right over the top of the sump well or the sump basin. Then after you do your barrier film, you come back with a real sump lid like this. And you've got this one down, you've got the donut ring underneath the film, then you've got the film, then you put this down on top of it and you screw the two together. Now, the beauty of that is you still got an open well, so that 4 screws out of this one, you could still change a sump. You can still service the sump, because the only thing you're lacking in a crawl space is, like Ron said, you don't have the concrete to mount it to. So this donut ring with this center cut out, typically we make the donut ring about a 4-inch outer shell. You've created a area to screw the lid to, and it works very well. All you're doing is sandwiching 2 lids together, but the bottom lid has the center cut out and the top lid is a full lid like it would be. So that's the way we do crawl spaces, where you don't have the concrete to access. And if you guys still have a question about this next week, I'll cut one of these out. I've got them cut out. I'll bring one in and I'll do a better explanation. I didn't think about that, Ron, and I'm so glad you brought it up, but I can show you a better explanation, because I still keep a few of these with the center cut out of them. And I encourage people to cut their own center out, because then they end up with a sump lid left, a smaller sump lid left. But
I like that. If you could do that next week, I'd really appreciate that.
You know, I'll put it on the list, and I'll even bring the radon barrier film in and put it between the two, so I can, I think sometimes I'm guilty of not explaining things real well. I'll make it easy to explain, screw the 2 halves together, and you'll be surprised the next time you do a crawl space. Because the problem with what you're doing, what most people do, is now you've got film over it. So what's a person supposed to do to replace that sump? Cut the film. Now they're ruining the integrity of what you did, unless they have a way of taping it back up. And it's pretty hard to tape. Even you would have trouble taping a piece of film together over an open hole. And so, and then the last thing I was going to say before I bug out on you people and let Ben finish is, we also, these things are a little bit overpriced. It's kind of frustrating because I don't think they should be as expensive as they are, but that's true about a lot of things. But we always use this gasket for the cord, because the beauty of it is, when you drill this hole is at 2 inches. You have to drill a 2-inch hole to pop this in. Okay. When you drill that 2-inch hole, this goes right through it. So this is plugged in, of course. This is hooked up, but then all you do, it's got a slot. All you do, pop it over, it seals tight against the cord and goes down into that hole and has a little rim that holds it in. So we use one of these on every electrical cord coming out of a sump, because it just makes it professional looking, number one, but it makes it very, very easy to access that cord. So we use this cord grommet, as they call it. And then we also use a grommet that somewhere in my office, I've dropped it, but we also use the same sort of style grommet to go around the 1.5 or 2-inch discharge pipe. So that when the plumber or whomever is replacing or in an emergency to fix that sump, you think about it, he's got 4 stainless steel screws that are in a simple plastic anchor. He's got a cord gasket like this that just pops away, and then he's got the ability to pop that lid up, because the discharge pipe is also in a gasket that's pretty easy to pop up. So in other words, he can pop that lid up 10 or 12 inches high in about 5 seconds, because everything is too easy. 5 seconds may be an exaggeration with the 4 stainless steel screws, but it's pretty doggone quick. But these 2 gaskets, wherever the other one went, these 2 gaskets also make it much more professional looking. But the main thing is they make it a lot easier for the plumber to not only access for the emergency, but to reinstall it. Because as I said in the beginning of this, we all need to remember that reinstallation is pretty dang important. We're not trying to build a radon system just to last until the next sump pump goes out. We're trying to build a radon system to last for these people's health as long as it can last, and certainly longer than a sump pump, hopefully. But I'm here to tell you, if the sump lid doesn't get reinstalled in a lot of situations, it's a very detrimental to the effects of a radon system. And as I said earlier, in basement situations especially, you go pulling from the open air, even through a sump basin, you're pulling a lot of conditioned air that's also lowers the effects of the radon and increases the energy bill. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about sumps next week, and Ron, especially, I want to go over what we typically do in a crawl space. But you know, as I said, I have to leave, but Ben's going to finish up with you guys. But I think we need to spend a little bit more time on sump basins. If you guys agree with me, you know, just make comments, and that's what we'll do next week. And I mean, I appreciate you guys listening to me, because it's important that we all try to do, you know, we're trying to affect the health of people. So we need to remember that we have a lot to do with people's health. And if I encouraged every one of you to watch Bruno's presentation that we had at our Midwest conference a few weeks ago. And I think the Midwest Radon Conference Association was going to put it up so that anybody could watch it. But, you know, Bruno's a great friend of mine, and does a lot of radon systems, but he also had a few heartbreaking testimonials from people that were dying from lung cancer associated with radon. And what they had to say is the same story we've all heard before. Why didn't somebody tell me that this was killing me? One of the ladies is in her kitchen baking cookies for her grandkids, and said, I loved my house. I didn't know it was going to kill me. And I'm like, you know, those are touching stories that we all need to look at once in a while, so we can remember what we're here for. And it's not enough just to try to encourage people to fix their home for radon. We all need to remember, we need to put something in there that does the job for a length of time, because how can we expect the consumer to know? I mean, consumer sees the word radon, they think they're okay, which is one of the arguments that we all have about passive systems. Oh, I've got a radon system. It says so on the pipe. So, you know, we need to remember that if we put a radon system in that's only good until the next time a plumber pulls the sump lid off, we fail to do our job.
So David, do you have time for a question or two? If people have got questions now, or it's 4 o'clock. I don't know if you've got a hard out or what.
I got a couple minutes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Anybody got questions right now on sumps?
Sorry, I was muted. That scenario Ron gave you with the sump pump in the crawl space, can you use that for a suction point in a crawl space?
Well, I don't see why not, but you guys are using the crawl space platforms. I know you're making your own to try to help that shipping, which I encourage you to do. But why would you do that? Because once again, it almost falls under the same scenario. Now you've made it more difficult to change that sump out when it needs changed out. And so the crawl space platform makes it so easy to do a suction point, and you can also locate it at a better location for your design, typically. So there's no question you could, but I think that logically it makes a lot more sense to use that crawl space platform. They're so handy to use.
Yeah.
That it's a good question, but typically it wouldn't be an advantage to do.
Yeah.
So as I said, I'd like to continue this next week. If you guys are like me, sometimes the question you have is not going to come until the middle of the night tonight when you wake up and say, well, I wish I would have asked somebody within the group to talk about this. And so, keep the communication going. This is what we're trying to do, is communicate about things, and think a little bit about comments you'd like to make.
Yeah,
There's-
definitely jump onto the Facebook group. It was nice that Pat was able to get that question in there, and we can kind of have discussion during the week on some of these topics. And then we're also able to use those questions and take them. Oh, David's leaving. All right.
Yes.
It's been fun. He's got a heart out. Yeah, like I said, you could jump in there and you could do that, and make sure that if you've got questions, we can add those. Usually what'll happen is, since David isn't usually in the Facebook group, I'll get those to him during the week, and that just gives us an opportunity to figure out what we're going to talk about. So anybody got any other questions or thoughts or comments or stuff before we bounce for the weekend? Nothing. Everybody good? Everybody still alive? There's sunshine, I hope, for most of you. Most of you have gotten out of the snow for the year, unless you're, Ron and Pat. It's always snow. Yeah. I hope you guys are getting outside, and it's way safer to get on roofs right now for most of you. So here's to the next 6 to 9 months of better working conditions, and let's go out and make some money. Let's get some systems in. Let's save some lives, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you guys so much for jumping in. We'll see you.